So for our project, what we decided to do is to take some of the concepts that we learned in class and apply it to what we do regularly here at our job as student naturalists at the EIC. So what we decided to do was to take some examples of what we've learned, how to do things and how not to do things, and make kind of a video about it with examples of what to do and what not to do.
Yep. So here's our video.
Alright guys, let's go learn about nature. You guys ready? What?
Okay. The introduction is a very important part of your program. This is where you introduce yourself, your theme, you establish rapport with your audience, and you introduce the rules. None of these things happened in the previous scene.
Welcome to the University of Michigan Dearborn Natural Area. I'm going to be your naturalist today. My name is Robert. How's everyone doing today?
Good.
Good, good. So I have a few rules before we go out there. For one, try to not touch anything. We have plants like poison ivy and stinging nettle and other plants like that could hurt you. Try to stay in a single file line. Try to stay quiet. And if anyone has a cell phone, I ask that you turn it off now, or if it's an emergency, put it on silent. Alright? But before we go out there, we're going to be looking at the seasonal changes that are occurring in the forest today. Alright. You guys can see this plant right here with the 3 leaves. Does anybody know what plant that is? Alright, so this is Toxodendron radicans, and like most members of the pecan family, it can produce an allergic reaction. In this case, it has an innate chemical called urushiol, which will result in a very nasty rash if you happen to touch this plant. So you guys probably don't want to be touching this plant. Alright, let's go.
In Sam Hamm's book, Environmental Interpretation, the character, the know-it-all, is one of the ones mentioned not to play. Robert was playing the know-it-all. He was telling people scientific names of plants that generally people don't know. Toxodendron radicans, that's poison ivy. People didn't know that.
Come here, you can see this plant right here. It has 3 leaves on it, and it has kind of the thumbs on it, so that the opposite, the outer leaves have kind of thumbs on it like this, and the inner leaf has thumbs like this. Does anyone know what plant this is? Poison ivy, yeah. Does anyone know what happens when you get poison ivy, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, you get a really bad rash. So this is one of the plants to stay away from. And this lake was actually made by Henry Ford. How you doing, sir? Hello. And we get all kinds of wildlife down at this lake. We'll get herons and ducks. You can often see turtles basking. Right now, unfortunately, you can't see any of these things, probably due to the weather. But take my word, this is a very good lake for wildlife.
Tilden's first principle of interpretation basically states that if an audience isn't experiencing something that's being talked about directly, they're not going to get anything out of the program. It's going to be meaningless to them. And that's exactly what happened here. So Robert was talking about ducks and herons and turtles, but they weren't there, so the audience doesn't really care.
Alright, so this is Hidden Lake, and this lake was actually made by Henry Ford. It's 1/3 of a mile long, and it's good that we have this lake here because it attracts certain kinds of wildlife that we wouldn't have here otherwise. If you look out, you can see a painted turtle out basking today, and you can also see a pair of mallard hens. And if you notice, do you know how to tell that those are 2 ducks that are female?
The color.
The color, and why are the females brown? Does anyone know? Anyone know why the females are brown? And the males have the big bright green heads?
To attract the mate.
To attract the mate. Okay, so the males are attractive to attract the females, but why are the females brown?
To protect their eggs when they have a nest.
Right, exactly. So they blend in so that they are not attracted to predators, and so that they can protect their babies. Right, so this plant right here, it's called a mayapple, and it bears a fruit about this time. it'd be hard to find a fruit that, right now because this is a favorite food of deer, and we have a high deer population here. But do you see how this plant right here, it has 2 leaves? And this plant right here has only 1 leaf. So only the ones with the 2 leaves will bear fruit, because these are the female plants, and the ones with only 1 leaf are the male plants. Isn't that interesting?
Okay, so Robert here told the group that the plants that had the 2 leaves were the female plants, and he was actually being a minister of misinformation because that's not true. They're just the older plants. These are monoecious plants, so they have the male and the female part on the same plants.
So this plant right here, it's called mayapple or mandrake, and it bears a fruit this time of year, though it'd be hard to find one. I don't see any right now, just because this is a favorite food of deer, and we have a high deer population here. But you can see here where the fruit would be attached, and you can see that this plant has 2 leaves. If you look over here, this plant has only 1 leaf and did not bear a fruit. That is because these plants, to bear a fruit, is age dependent. So this plant is old enough to bear fruit, whereas that one right there is not old enough. So this right here, this plant is a black alder. It's actually native to Europe, but this plant was planted here along the edge of the lake by Henry Ford's landscape architect Jensen. This right here, this is a sugar maple. All right. That's poison ivy. It's another black alder. This is a honeysuckle. This is another. This is a buckthorn. Another European plant. Right. This is a Virginia jump seed. This is a basswood. You can eat the leaves in the spring. This is a plant here. It's called the black snake root. It's got these seeds that'll stick to your clothes.
One problem many interpreters have is that they just go crazy with naming things, and the audience really isn't interested in that. So to be a better interpreter, you're going to want to take time to talk about an individual object or plant or animal, and you're not going to captivate your audience like that. They're just not going to learn anything.
So here we can see a couple of examples of the seasonal changes that are occurring. You can see that things are starting to kind of wind down as we transition into autumn. You can see this plant right here. It's past flower and it's starting to produce seed. If we look here on the ground, you can see that the leaves are starting to change color. And especially if we look over here, the example is really striking of the changing color of the leaves. And all this is an indicator of the seasonal changes that are occurring in the forest. So this is another good example of an autumnal phenomenon. If we look down on the ground, what are some of the things that we see?
Acorns.
Acorns, yeah, you can see right here acorn. Pass it down so everyone can take a look at it. Does anyone know what kind of tree an acorn comes from?
An acorn tree?
That's the stupidest thing I've heard today.
Okay, Robert's reaction today was extremely inappropriate. You are never ever going to laugh at your audience members. That's just going to turn them off, and they're not going to be listening for the rest of the program.
And what kind of tree does an acorn come from?
An acorn tree?
An acorn tree. Have you ever heard of an acorn tree?
I think so.
I've never heard of an acorn tree. What are some of the other trees that we know? Oak trees, yes. Acorns come from oak trees.
Okay, so Robert took the question very well this time. He didn't laugh at the audience member. And if you notice, we had 2 people join our group. So he just went on with the program like nothing happened. And you should never exclude people from the program if they want to join. They're just coming along for the ride.
Alright, so guys, look down on the ground here. What do we see? What are these?
Acorns?
Acorns. So if these are acorns here, what kind of tree do you think this is right here? An oak tree, right? This is a red oak. This is a very large red oak. But if we look here on the ground, what kind of tree is this? A maple. So this is not an oak. Hey man, what are you doing? Get back here. Don't play with things. Did I tell you to do that? You're supposed to be paying attention here.
Okay, so in Ham's book, Environmental Interpretation, Robert here was playing the role of the cop. He shouldn't have been so forceful with the audience member here because he's not going to listen anyway, so just handle it calmly and it'll be okay. You don't need to yell at people.
Excuse me, man. Do you think we could come back with the group here? Try to stay on the trail. I don't want you to step on anything. Thank you. Alright guys, well we're back. That's about it then. Thanks for coming out.
That was an example of an improper conclusion. There was no wrap-up at the end of the scene, so the audience doesn't really know if it's over or not, if they have to keep going or if they can go home.
Well, thank you guys for coming out with me today. I hope you had fun and really learned a lot about things that are happening this time of year in our forest. Remember, we do seasonals all year round, and you're always welcome to come here and walk the trails anytime you want. Alright, well thank you guys. So the most important thing about interpretation is not the knowledge, it's about the communication. Basically, you want to be a good host to your audience. You want to interact with them and be provocative. You want to ask a lot of questions and really make them think about their experience and how they relate to the land.